Josh Sargent rises to the top of the striker pool again. Just where will Lucho Acosta land, and what is bringing American investment to the English lower leagues? That and more here on Monday's Morning Kickaround. Hello and welcome to the show. This is Morning Kickaround, where we cover the world's favorite game from the world's favorite country, coming to you live each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning. I'm Robert Kerr. He's Jason Davis. How you doing this morning, sir?
I'm good. Interesting Sunday we had in America. We don't need to go into the other football, but that was a thing that happened, and now we're here together to talk about our beloved soccer, our beloved football, our beloved calcio, whatever you want to call it, Robert.
Yeah. Last night happened, and we won't have any more American football for quite some time, so we get to focus on the round ball that we enjoy so much. You are on the radio each day, don't get to talk about your shirts, and you usually have some good soccer ones, so you have a different one. I haven't seen this one. Tell us about your shirt here, Jason.
Yeah, this is not one I usually pull off the rack. This is not maybe going out. This is, if you can see, it's a little form-fitting. It's a little tight. It's maybe too authentic, I guess. If you
it's
watch
flattering
Mexican
on your
football.
shoulders. Your shoulders are looking good.
Thank you. It's not the shoulders and the upper body that I have an issue with, and thank you for the compliment. I will take it. I've been working pretty hard. It's the midsection, which, it's okay. I'm not going to say that I'm unhappy. It's there when the shirt gives you no room to, maybe spread out a little bit. It does, like, why would I go out in this if it wasn't winter and I wasn't wearing a coat over it? Maybe not. This is my Club Leon shirt. You can see it there. Obviously, Mexican club of some renown. The reason I own this shirt, not because I bought it myself, but because when I was doing the United States of Soccer, the radio show, a listener, when I was talking about Landon Donovan going to Club Leon, decided to buy me this shirt and send it to me. So I don't remember his name. Thank you very much for this shirt, which, again, gets occasionally pulled out when I need to show off on Morning Kickaround, I guess. Is that. And, of course, Landon Donovan's stint at Club Leon was... It was corto. It was a short one.
It was definitely a cup of coffee. Would be a great way to describe that stay. And we were talking about it, when we were preparing the show. Does the amount of advertising on a shirt impact your want to purchase or to wear it around?
Yeah, well, look, we are not sponsored yet here on Morning Kickaround. If you like the show and you want to be part of it and sponsor the show, please reach out, morningkickaround@gmail.com. But we're not sponsored yet, so this is all going to be value added for the various companies that had bought space on this shirt back when Landon Donovan was playing here. Office Depot twice, just in case you missed it one time. Here's another one. 2 Office Depots, mobile. What else we got over here? This is the wrong way. Univision Deportes. I don't know what KYB is, but it says our precision, your advantage in English in Mexico. So that's interesting. Telcel, obviously. And then I think there's you can't see it and I'm not going to pull it all the way up, but it's a cement company that sponsors Club Leon. Yes. As I put this on this morning, I was thinking this is so much advertising that I think if I was considering buying a shirt, whether it was whatever, because Landon Donovan was playing there and there was an American connection, or just because, maybe I like Cruz Azul this year, or maybe I'm into wearing a Club America shirt or something like that, because those are famous clubs, right? They're successful. Monterrey, Tigres, Pumas, who I just watched play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup up in British Columbia against Calvary FC of Canada, who beat them, by the way. Shout out to Calvary FC. Pumas has that incredible logo, that stylized Puma face. It's incredible. It's great. But if I'm buying a shirt and there's like 12 companies all over it, I might not do that. Like we know that this is kind of weird, though. It's a little bit ironic because this is too much advertising and I'm turned off by it. And would I buy this shirt and wear it out? But of course, if you buy a shirt and international teams are accepted, but if you buy a shirt of a club and it doesn't have a shirt sponsor, it feels weird, right?
I'm empty. Surprised that Chelsea hasn't been talked about more. They've gone almost the whole season without it on their shirt. But yeah, it does look empty without it. Some shirts obviously look better, but
Can I
it's
pull out
kind of
the
funny to
curtain for a
see you.
second?
Sure, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to do this real quick because our producer Jenny is helping out, and she said Calgary is in Alberta. Yes, they are. They're a Calgary team. They were playing in British Columbia because their stadium does not meet CONCACAF Champions Cup standards. So there you go. I'm calling her out. I'm pulling back the curtain. My apologies, Jenny. I just wanted to clarify that that's why they were playing in British Columbia, not in Calgary. What were you saying, Robert?
I was just gonna say, when you see a youth team that has like they're wearing like their favorite team, they all bought like the kits of the same team. Because I remember in Chicago seeing youth team playing with shirts that said Corona on the front, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable with like 7-year-olds running around with Corona on the front. And to be fair, I was like a 5th grader with Carlsberg across the front of my shirt.
When you're mimicking the big professional club and you're taking on their identity, that comes with the territory. And of course, the kids want the shirt that looks like what the players have on the television. They don't want a shirt without Carlsberg on it or without Corona on it. Yeah, that's a thing. And obviously, in terms of sponsorship, it doesn't matter how low a level you're playing. Like the Latino leagues in my neighborhood that play just in the middle school near my house, they're all rocking shirts with sponsors on them. Like, really? You guys got a sponsor? Like, that's incredible. And I'm talking about like big companies are on those shirts because, why not? If you've got a business, put your name on everything you can possibly put your name on.
And if you'd like to sponsor this program, any of the aforementioned sponsors, write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. We are definitely open to partnerships to continue growing this channel and this show. You can follow along on social media too, @mkickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And if you want to help us continue our way towards becoming a hub for the American soccer conversation, there's no Twitter anymore. There's no Extra Time Radio anymore. So there needs to be a central hub for the American soccer conversation. And we're hoping to be just that. One of the things to do, you can help us at Ko-Fi. Make a donation, kofi.com/morningkickaround. And last but not least, before we get going, click subscribe, Morning Kickaround on YouTube. We're working towards 1,000. And why don't you be the next? With all that said, let's get into today's headlines. Let's kick Monday's long balls. Long ball number 1 for Monday, February 10th. With the combination of the news that Ricardo Pepi is out and Josh Sargent is back in the Norwich lineup, back scoring goals, Josh Sargent returns to the summit of the American number 9 depth chart. He scored another goal in Norwich's 1-1 draw with Derby. What do you think of the redheaded American being the number 9?
I do think that even if he wasn't scoring goals, Josh Sargent would probably by default be the guy right now, right? I mean, we don't have anybody who's both in form and actually playing soccer except for Josh Sargent, who just came back from injury. Let's remember that he has only been back for a couple weeks and he scored a bunch of goals. If Ricardo Pepi was healthy, if we didn't get word on Friday that Ricardo Pepi is going to miss the remainder of the European season, Peter Bosch dropping that news, they're so matter of fact, the Dutch. It's like, we're assuming that Ricardo Pepi is done for the year. It's like, you just broke my heart, Peter. Like, why not have a little bit more care for me as an American soccer fan, just dropping casually that Ricardo Pepi is done for the year? No surprise. He had surgery. It does look like he's going to a meniscus tear. He's going to have some work to do. It's not the 9-month ACL and knee injury that could potentially ruin, not just the next window for the U.S. men's national team, but go into the summer and put him in jeopardy and maybe even affect his chances of being in form in 2026. So I guess that's some solace, Robert. But obviously it's not good. Fowler and Balogun, again, not healthy, not contributing, not playing, there's nothing there to hold on to. So it would be Josh Sargent anyway. But at least the man's scoring goals. I think we had a comment on a video that we did last week, one of our segments on the striker pool, on the U.S. men's national team situation when we were talking about Americans abroad. And this was very clearly a Sargent fan. Very clearly somebody who wanted to stand up for Josh Sargent and say, wait a second, this guy is scoring goals in a good league. Why are you so down on him? And really the only reason to be down on him if you're an American soccer fan, Robert, is that he just hasn't scored for the United States men's national team when he's had his opportunities. So I want to be positive. I want to believe in Josh, who I've always thought was a well-rounded, talented footballer. Right? But again, what is the ceiling for Josh Sargent? Is the ceiling, I'll ask you this, Robert, is the ceiling for Josh Sargent as high as it is for Ricardo Pepi?
No, I wouldn't say so at this point. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to say if he's not, or because whenever he seems to be getting into full fitness, full flow, full form, he immediately gets another injury again. And so it is hard to know where that ceiling is. I mean, hopefully Pepe isn't following that same trajectory of once he gets his place in the team and gets into some good form, he gets stymied by an injury. But the question is Sargent's ceiling as high as Pepe's? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes. Yeah, I'm asking you, like, if you...
I honestly don't think it is anymore. For the national team?
Yeah, for the national team. I mean, Ricardo Pepi has scored goals when he's played for the U.S. men's national team. Josh Sargent simply has not. Now, you could argue that, again, injury is a major part of this, and you could say that, you know, he hasn't been given a run under a good manager. Like, you could certainly make that argument. The guy he's played for is somebody that people think didn't do a good job in our attack, especially. And Greg Berhalter.
Okay, so answer your question better. I think both of their experiences with the national team are too fragmented to really give an honest answer to that, because, yeah, like you said, different managers, different situations, coming in here for a couple games, then getting injured, come in here, get a couple injuries. But obviously Pepe's output for the American national team has been far superior. Josh Sargent, to your point, he hasn't scored for the American team since, I think, pre-COVID, maybe once or twice ever. And Pepe, more often than not, does get the goals, and he gets the big goals when he is called upon more often than not. And just to put it in context for folks who are not following Sargent at Norwich in the championship this year, he's made 18 appearances, 8 goals, 5 assists. So that's a pretty good output there. And I don't think, because he's been in and out with injury, I don't think all of those 18 appearances are starts either. So his minutes to goal ratio good now. Whether that translates, like Pepe hasn't been able to do the club side until this year for the most part, but has done the business for the Americans. But it's kind of been flip-flopped for Sargent.
No, I would say Ricardo Pepi scored goals in MLS. He didn't score goals at Augsburg. He's scored goals since he arrived at PSV Eindhoven last year with fewer minutes, this year with more goals, but obviously not getting starts, not getting long stretches of play for us to say, oh, this is what we're looking for when we think about who do we want to start for the U.S. men's national team, particularly at a goal-scoring position, a position that is prioritized in most people's minds. We need a goal-scoring number 9. You want to be able to check all the boxes. Playing regular minutes for club, scoring regular goals for club, and then when he comes to the national team, scores goals for the national team. That we want to be able to check all those boxes, and we have nobody who checks all those boxes right now. Sargent is the closest thing we have to checking the first two, right? And he is. Yeah. And again, it's not because he's just come back from injury, we still maybe need a little bit more runway before we're confident that he's just this player again. But there is this belief that he can score goals in a system that benefits his talents. So coming back to the stats, Ricardo Pepi, 33 American caps, 13 goals, right? So that's nearly 1 every 2, not quite. For Josh Sargent, who, as you mentioned, has not scored a goal for the U.S. men's national team since before COVID, November 19th, 2019, 5 goals, 27 caps. Now, of course, he started 2 games at the World Cup, and Ricardo Pepi didn't go. So people are holding that against him. We didn't score goals at the World Cup. Josh Sargent started games at the World Cup. Ricardo Pepi got left off the team. Josh Sargent should never play for the U.S. men's national team. And that is a ridiculous sequence of thoughts to have. Because, number 1, beggars can't be choosers at this point. And number 2, we don't know if maybe Josh Sargent would benefit from playing under Mauricio Pochettino. And we don't know if maybe this is a situational thing. If we have a player who's scoring goals at a decent level, and the championship is a decent level, it's maybe the 7th or 8th best league in the world, depending on your viewpoint, then he should get a chance to play for the U.S. men's national team, and hopefully under Pochettino, he scores some goals. As long as he doesn't get hurt between now and then, and we all knock on wood, he will be the starter for the U.S. men in the March camp, I would imagine. And maybe Patrick Agyemang has proven himself enough in, 2 games with the national team, and maybe he has some games under his belt in MLS that proves he's ready to do something more, but I don't know that people would be 100% on board with an young MLS player, or relatively inexperienced MLS player. And by the way, they're the same age. Patrick Agyemang and Josh Sargent the same age.
That's right? Incredible. The aging difference, we should do a segment all on the aging disparities. It's like the dog years. It's like 7 years here is 1 year there. Yeah, the fact that Sargent been a pro, been in the the American view of the team for quite some time. Agyemang
for a long time,
just now peaking up.
And this works against Sargent because we have a book on him. And people have already pushed him to the side because in the circumstances under which he played, he didn't deliver what we wanted. Agyemang has no book. All we have is a couple of friendlies against weak opposition where he scored goals, and your brain goes crazy filling in the gap. There's a vacuum of information, and what you do is you imagine the best possible scenario. You don't imagine him struggling. You don't. You imagine him scoring goals because, we don't have a lot of evidence, so why wouldn't I hope for the best? You can still do that with Josh Sargent. You can still imagine that at 24 years of age, Josh Sargent is like 7 months older than Patrick Agyemang. You can imagine that Josh Sargent can still score goals for the U.S. men's national team if he is healthy and he's playing for a manager who knows how to use him. Let's see what happens.
Well, Josh Sargent will have another opportunity, as is the nature of the championship, just a grinder of more games. He's back in action potentially for Norwich against Preston tomorrow on Tuesday. So the game's coming thick and fast for the Americans. Number 9. Long ball number 2 here on Monday. Lucho Acosta, the drama that of probably the top piece of MLS preseason drama, perhaps. Lucho Acosta holding out on Cincinnati. He came late. Some fitness situations. Not everything is kosher for Lucho Acosta in Cincinnati. And according to reporting from Tom Bogert, there's some teams in the mix to acquire his services, including Dallas and San Jose. But Cincinnati wants Evander from Portland. So there's a few different dominoes to fall in this Lucho Acosta saga.
Yeah, look, I actually was just on a Cincinnati-based podcast yesterday. I don't know if the episode has dropped yet, so look for it. The Post-Cincy had me on their podcast. We didn't really talk specifically about FC Cincinnati or Lucho Acosta, but there was sort of a conversation about media and how this sport is covered in America, and I'm going to dovetail it here because if this was the NFL, and a player like Lucho Acosta was holding out, and he wasn't happy, and he had already told the team that he didn't want to be there anymore, and he had called his general manager, if he had said his general manager had created a bad working environment and was a terrible general manager, despite the fact that Chris Albright helped turn FC Cincinnati from a bottom feeder into an MLS Cup contender, this would be top page, front page news. Yep. It would be front page news in Cincinnati, and it might even break through into a national conversation. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's not where MLS is. But you and I care very much. Soccer-wise cares very much. Lots of people on podcasts locally and nationally care very much about MLS and these sagas, and this is wild drama. So again, Lucho Acosta went public and said that Chris Albright was a terrible general manager. Now we have word from Pat Noonan on Saturday, after Lucho Acosta was posting on social media that he was training on his own, and there were rumors that Estudiantes was going to come in with a move for Lucho Acosta, only to have further reports suggest that Estudiantes actually doesn't have the money to do it. Now we're at the point where Pat Noonan is giving an update that Lucho will join the team. But as you said, Tom Bogert, the ultimate MLS insider, the guy that knows everything, says that FC Dallas and San Jose are two teams having talks with Cincinnati about Lucha, but if Cincinnati moves Lucho Acosta, I said Lucha, I meant Lucho, they would be able to go and get Evander out of Portland. And there's been lots of talk about Evander leaving Portland. These are the two players that when Major League Soccer announced the cash for trades market, which is basically just being able to buy a player rather than having to trade tradable assets. These were the two players most talked about as dominoes who could fall. Now, we've had several moves. Jack McGlynn, we had Ted Pietro. I'm missing somebody else who, Joveljic went from L.A. to Sporting Kansas City for cash. These players are going to cost significantly more than anybody, and it was $4 million for Joveljic, if I remember correctly. Sporting Kansas City dropped for him. So these players are both worth more than Joveljic on their production. Is this a situation where we're going to see really what this cash for trades market looks like if Dallas and San Jose are considering doing that? And can you imagine with the group that he's putting together? And I've been watching it, and he's got talent and he's got interesting players, and I think Chicho Arango is one of them. But Bruce adding Lucho Acosta to be the string puller in his team, wow, that gets real fascinating if he can pull that off. So this is incredible news. This is salacious stuff on some level because of the words that are being used certainly by the Lucho Acosta side. But I'm fascinated to see how this resolves.
We shall see. And it is just kind of interesting to see teams competing for players within the league. I mean, hopefully that's what the cash for trades thing adds to the mix, is teams competing with each other for the talent within the league itself. Long ball number 3 here for Monday. Reports coming out that Ryan Reynolds and McElhenney, the celebrities behind the big purchase of Wrexham and the rise that they've provided to that team over in the UK. Vancouver Whitecaps are on the selling block, and possible interest from the celebrities to buy them for reported $300 million. What do you think of this one, Jason?
Yeah, this is okay. So I think some dots are being connected here that maybe aren't actually connected. But first of all, when we heard that the Vancouver Whitecaps were being put up for sale by Greg Kerfoot and Steve Nash is involved in that group, and I'm missing a couple of other bigger names who are part of the ownership there in Vancouver, it only made sense that Ryan Reynolds would be connected to the potential purchase of the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So because he's got money, I mean, how many Ryan Reynolds podcast or YouTube or television commercials have you seen in the last week?
Many. I was going to say, this is a whole separate game. Who is more overexposed, Patrick Mahomes, Rob Gronkowski, or Ryan Reynolds?
Or Matthew McConaughey, who I might come back to because he was certainly all over the Super Bowl. Okay, so Ryan Reynolds has got a lot of money. Now, he's also got some personal things going on that I think are worth mentioning. There is a lawsuit against him for a lot of money. Now, he got pulled in because of what's going on with his wife, but there's a lawsuit against him for a lot of money, and I don't know how that's going to impact his ability to do things like invest in Wrexham or buy an MLS team. But over at the Mirror, they do have a story that says he's been linked. Now it's the Mirror. Don't come at me.
We should have prefaced this whole story with the Mirror reports.
Which is why my skepticism level is high, because it's a Mirror story that I'm seeing this. And again, it's so easy to just go, football club for sale. Ryan Reynolds is from Vancouver. Oh, he owns Wrexham. Oh, he's going to buy Vancouver. Yeah, again, is that real? Is there any? It could be that somebody has made an approach. It could be that somebody representing Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney have picked up a phone. It could be that, two people connected with the organizations had a conversation. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? It doesn't mean that it's going down. But he is Van City Reynolds everywhere, right? Like, he is so tied to the city of Vancouver that it only makes sense that people would jump to this. Now, here is the difference. Now, again, minority stake. Probably not a 300 million pound takeover, which is like $400 million, because that's the value. And again, connect some dots. That's the value that was pegged on Vancouver when Sportico dropped their valuations on MLS clubs last week. So think about the timing of that Sportico story that now has a number attached to it that the Mirror can pick up and say, here's Ryan Reynolds, who is from Vancouver, owns a football club already, and now we have a number that we can slap into the headline. right? That 300 million pounds and get people, oh, wow, that's an incredible story. So this is what Urias is saying, and this is absolutely important. Wrexham cost them 5 to 10 million, literally money they have in their bank accounts. An MLS club, even the cheapest, would be well out of their money sphere unless they are just minority faces. Now, it's possible that a consortium with Reynolds and McElhenney involved could buy the Vancouver Whitecaps. Would it be the same thing as them being the owners of Wrexham? No, not at all. Not even close. It would be like Steve Nash. Do you think Steve Nash dropped $50 million into the Whitecaps? I don't think he did, right? I don't know what Steve Nash made in his NBA career. He didn't make dumb money. He made very good money. He was an MVP. He made good money. But he's not rolling so deep that he can be the lead face of an ownership group in the Vancouver Whitecaps at this point in MLS's development. So I don't think Ryan Reynolds has really big money because he has Mint Mobile and he sold the gin company and whatever. I'm sure he's got really big money. But that doesn't mean he has really big money that he's willing to commit to buying an MLS team. So I don't know. It is interesting. You do need a billionaire to own an MLS team these days, which is, by the way, why when people talk about the bubble that is MLS valuations, that is true that there is a bubble. But as long as there are billionaires who want to have some stake in sports, and there are only so many sports franchises available, particularly in the United States and Canada, where there are how many hockey teams are there in Canada? 10, 5, 8, 9? I don't know how many there are. I'd have to count them. I'd think about it. There's only 32 NFL teams. There's only, Major League Baseball. There's 100 major professional sports clubs in America and Canada, maybe more than that. But
roughly.
That's still a relatively small group, and there are some that are legacy holdings of the families. That's all. The Rooneys own the Steelers still years and years and years later. So it's a club that's difficult to get into. So this is interesting, right? This is a thing that you can imagine happening, but we don't have any real news, real evidence that anything is actually cooking behind the scenes that would see this go down.
Reynolds, he's Canadian from that general area. This team's for sale. Let's draw the lines and get some clicks. And to answer the questions regarding what was paid for Wrexham, somewhere in the land of 2.5 million. So
not
a
even
a bit of a different cup there.
And this is going to come up later in the show. So this will be a little tease for everybody who's going to stick it out with us on the live show. And if you're watching the end of this video later on, then you can find the rest of this later in a different video or in the live show if you want to watch it back. We're going to be talking about American investment, or Canadian investment, I guess, in the case of Ryan Reynolds. We're going to talk about North American investment in the lower divisions of the English football pyramid, of which Wrexham is a member, obviously, despite being Welsh. We're going to talk about it later.
All right, that should do it for Long Balls here for Monday. If you'd like to, help out the show, very easy way to do it. Click subscribe. We are on our way to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so be sure to click subscribe and be the very next to do it. And tell your friends and family members or anyone you get into a soccer conversation with that Morning Kickaround is the best place to go for the American soccer conversation. Follow us along on social media at @mkickaround on the various platforms, including X, Instagram, Blue Sky, or if you have a little bit of change in your pocket, or you feel like you might have a little bit of change each and every month, Ko-fi.com/Morning Kickaround. We thank anyone who has donated so far and anyone who can, moving forward, help us grow this show. We're going to catch our breath and come right back with today's hot topic. Come right back. All right, the big hot topic here on Monday morning. U.S. investors are betting big on lower league English clubs. We're going to take a look at a story from Mr. Delaney and take a look at what he thinks is the motivations behind that, and maybe kind of put our feet in the shoes of a North American investor and kind of look at what an American investment might look like and what an English investment might look like. What was your take when you peeked at this Miguel Delaney story?
Yeah, you had before we jumped on the show today. We were talking about covering this story, and Miguel Delaney's piece is headlined "Why U.S. Billionaires and Tech Bros Are Betting Big on Lower League Football." And I kind of pushed back against making this just about billionaires. I know it's in his headline, Rob, so I understand why we would be drawn to the idea of billionaires. But I do think this goes beyond that, and I think Miguel, despite the headline, does explain that this is not just about billionaires.
Billionaires are hot right now.
In lower league football. This is sort of a bigger group of American investors. And you could argue that this is all following Wrexham. Right? This is about following in the Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds footsteps. And I think there's probably something to that, right? This is, it's a copycat world that we live in. And if you see something work the way that Wrexham has worked for those guys, you may think, oh, we can do this too. Obviously, the price point is a major selling part of this. I'm getting interrupted by my 4-year-old. Yeah, Tiago.
What's he have to say?
Alexa's talking to him upstairs. So this is, I know this is live, so we'll have to cut this out of the video that gets posted later. Tiago, ve la televisor, ¿está bien?
Well, you're going into your household chat. I'll look into our chat. I hear Urias wants to buy Recreativo de Hulva if he had the spare change.
Oh,
I'd love to know what country that's in.
Okay. We were. Oh, should we do the pronunciation thing or should we just leave it alone? Like, should we just let you? I would have done the same thing 5 years ago, so I'm not even going to be too mad.
All right, so I'll give it one more shot and you can cane me. Recreativo de Hulva.
Okay. Huelva. Don't say the H. Say Huelva. Huelva. Okay. Recreativo de Huelva. See, it's hard for me to switch over to it, and I'm speaking to the little one in Spanish. Okay. He seems to be okay now. I will go check on him momentarily. He's homesick from daycare, hence the interruption. But obviously, coming back to this, the price point is a major factor in why this is attractive for these groups, because as we described earlier, Wrexham cost McElhenney and Reynolds $2.5 million. Like, that's nothing. Now, I mean, for them, it's nothing. For you and me, it's a lot. Obviously, everything is predicated, though, on taking the $2.5 million investment and turning it into something much more valuable, right? And for Reynolds and McElhenney, the plan was create content around the team, invest in the team, climb the ladder, climb the pyramid in England, which they've done successfully to this point.
I would say their creative storytelling and their ability to get emotional buy-in from people across the planet is very much underrated. It's not just they put some money into a soccer team and now they're good, so people like them.
Right. So this is the problem I think that exists for anybody else who's trying to follow this example or follow in the footsteps of Reynolds and McElhenney or do it this way. This blueprint for them, I've always argued, is tied to their celebrity. If without their celebrity, does any of this work? But I still think that lots of people see this as a value proposition because it's a relatively small investment. Again, $2.5 million will get you a club in the National League, which is where Wrexham was when they bought them. And you have access to the top league in the world, right? Through the English pyramid, if you do everything perfectly, you can get to the Premier League. And even if you don't, you could presumably add value to your investment, right? But this is where it gets real sticky for us as fans. A couple of things. One of them is, do these people care about the game at all? Like, do they care about soccer at all? And even more than that, do they know anything about soccer? There is a note in Miguel Delaney's piece where he said a sporting director interviewed with a club bought by Americans. And that person went into an interview and came out like, I'm not even sure I was interviewed. Like, I don't know what that was. None of that made sense to me, meaning the person in charge of doing the interviewing clearly had no concept of the sport or the structures or the culture. And then there's this other thing, and this is maybe less of an issue for Americans who are on the other side of the world and can just watch. And, it's exactly what comes out of the Wrexham story, right? And welcome to Wrexham itself as a show. The people in Wrexham might be fine with it because they're living it up as fans of a club that has now climbed multiple divisions under the ownership of Reynolds and McElhenney. But they're fetishizing blue-collar UK culture, right? They're taking the culture of lower division football and of a blue-collar place like Wrexham, and they're turning it into product. Mm-hmm. And is that something anybody should be comfortable with, but especially the people who come from these communities? Should they be comfortable with somebody coming in, some American, some Yank, some person from somewhere else who doesn't really have a connection to the community, saying, you know what we're going to do? We're going to lift you up. You're going to climb the pyramid with us in charge because we're going to invest in your club. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. But by the way, we're also going to milk the community for everything it's worth, potentially, if we're going to follow the Wrexham blueprint. Not everybody will do that, of course. But again, it's a lack of understanding. It's a lack of institutional knowledge. Delaney mentions that there's a plan. He's seen like a business plan from one of these investment groups. They bought a club and they have get promoted to the championship. And the revenues that would result are on the books as in the business plan. We're going to get this much more revenue from being a championship club. But it has nothing about how you are going to become a championship club. How are you going to get promoted to that level so that the club will have that revenue? Like just a big gap. In fact, I think it was Charlie Boehm. I'll give him full credit because it's a great joke. If you know South Park, it's very funny. The underpants gnomes, right? Step 1, collect underpants. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit. And it's like, wait, that question mark is a big thing in all of this. And for these investors, you got to wonder if they have a big question mark in the middle of buy the club and profit.
Yeah, and there has to be success, buy-in, and for a lot of these teams, they probably have, full, depending on which club it is, they probably have full stands already. And so there's a whole lot of layers that they have to be added. Like Wrexham, I mean, their stadium was falling apart. Their attendance was down because they were in such a bleak position. They had been just scraping by. And I mean, outside of the 2.5 million, they for the club itself, they probably invested, hundreds of times that on all the upgrades and all the various perks and the things they've done to win that buyback in. So maybe that 2.5 is a little deceptive. And but there's a lot more like this, like you said, the celebrity and just the good nature and all that. And then going back to fetishizing or putting the blue collar English person in the limelight, for the individuals that have benefited from that, they're probably fine. Yeah. So if someone tried to recreate that, so if you're in Birmingham and you want to create those stories, it would be a little bit dirty. Like, hey, let's find the guy that kind of like ruined his family life by being a hooligan on the terraces and that sort of thing.
Maybe. I think it's really tough as a fan of some of these clubs. And I when I was covering the Wrexham story in the beginning on my old radio show, I would occasionally hear from fans of other National League clubs when they are in that division. And those fans, and this gets mentioned in Miguel's piece as well, those fans would say they're skewing the market, right? They're basically doing a city, but in the National League. They're because they spend so much more than anybody else, even if it's not millions upon millions upon millions of pounds, right? It's just a matter of scale, right? When you're in the National League and you can pay a player $100,000 a year or whatever it is, that's massive, right? I don't know if that's accurate, but it's fairly significant when they can recruit the level that they did. And if you watch the first couple seasons of Welcome to Wrexham, you saw them do that. You saw them go out and bring in these players who were capable of playing in a division or two higher, and they paid them more to play in the National League so they could win promotion, right? So other fans of other clubs in the National League go, wait a second, that's not fair. We don't have that money to compete. That skews everything. But of course, if you were on the Wrexham side of it, you're like, this is bloody great. This is fantastic. And then if you're a fan of another club and you see that some American outfit is eyeing you up, you go, yes, please buy us. Right? I've talked about this a lot. Like, if you're going to level up, particularly in the Premier League, and become a potential contender to win titles, you have to be bought by a sovereign wealth fund or a petrostate. Like, this is just how it works now. You can't just kind of like when you're now Arsenal is still relatively traditional in its structure, so maybe they're the exception these days. But if you want to move into the upper echelon, having not already been there, and you could argue that from a revenue perspective, Arsenal's already in the upper echelon, Robert. Well, then you needed the massive money, foreign money, to come in and buy you. It happened to City, it happened to Chelsea. right? Those two teams leveled up into the level they're at because somebody with billions invested in them. And that's just the way it is. And it's not any less true in the lower divisions, right? It's not any less true in the National League than it is in the Premier League. It's just a matter of scale. And so when these groups buy these clubs, if you're a fan of the club, do you care about their intentions? Do you care about their motivations? If their motivation is just to raise you up, squeeze the value out, and sell you again, is that a problem if you are on the ride that, say, Wrexham is on right now?
I think a lot of folks in the short term, if they're finding the success, I think in the short term they'll do it. Maybe they come out the other side in a couple of years and was like, hey, we really got used and abused and my pocketbook's empty. But at the same time, I think in the short term, if their day out, if their favorite day of the week is the day going down to the game and the game experience has improved since that buyout, then maybe short term, yes, it's worth it. But maybe big picture, it's eroded.
Right. So it comes back to this sort of existential question for us as soccer fans. Right. And I didn't grow up in an English environment, so I don't have that deep-seated connection, but I appreciate it intellectually. And certainly it we have similar emotional bonds with our professional teams in America, even if they are all franchises and always were. It's this idea of, do you throw up your hands and say, well, this is just the way it works, and I would rather be on the winning side, meaning I would rather have the investment from somebody who doesn't have any connection to my community, who might be just milking our club for more money, and so we can have potential success because that's what I'm living for with my club? Or, do you say, this is terrible, I hate this system, I hate the way this works, and either opt out or push back against it? And I don't know if I mentioned, was it this show that I mentioned FC United of Manchester last week? Yeah. Mm-hmm. They opted out and went and did their own thing. Now, they'll never have the glory of a European night at Old Trafford because they chose not to do that. Or a European night with their club, FC United of Manchester, is not going to be a Champions League level club. They chose to watch and enjoy a different level of football because they don't want to be tied to the corporate interest, to the moneyed interest, to the investment, and that's what this is.
All right, so before we're done with this segment, let's put our investor hat on. Jason, do you have an American investor hat you can put on right now? Do you have something?
No, I don't have a hat with a big dollar sign. What do they wear? Is it like the green visor thing, like the people in Vegas wear? Is that one?
Sure. For our purposes, let's put on our green money visors. And you are a North American that in the investor class who wants to get involved in soccer. Let's examine what our options are to get involved in the game at a lower league level on the American side. So you'd kind of have to look at, what investment at the front of this would you need, and what kind of support or infrastructure is there for you to invest in, and where do you find that improved value? Because obviously at the end of the day, buy low, sell high. Overseas, it's, buy a team. The theory, buy low, buy a team in the doldrums, get promoted, underpants. There's your profit. On the American side, where would you say is that buy-in value at the lower league level? Where were we talking for that?
So okay. So I mean, I don't know that we're pegging every club at $2.5 million, which is what Wrexham apparently cost.
The average, I looked it up, the average championship side in England is around that $2.5 million mark.
The average championship side? You buy a championship club for $2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's...
Or £2.5 million pounds, so that's over $3 million.
No, that still seems the average championship side sounds very low for a second division team, but maybe that's the case.
Trust transfer market.
That's the value of their total roster in terms of transfer fees. I don't think that's the value of the club itself as a business unit. But
it says average market value of an English championship team is around £2.5 million.
But okay. That maybe. I'm still not sure about those numbers. But I will say this: if we're talking about that kind of investment, the USL, which is still expanding, I believe it is $20 million to get into the USL Championship as an expansion franchise, and something like $5 million to join League One. So you have, at least somewhat similar numbers at the League One level to what you might pay for an English club. something like that. Obviously, significantly higher for USL Championship. If the money, if just pure dollars is the issue, it's really hard to argue you're not getting a better value in England than you would here. But I think that you are doing different things. Like, I'm not sure these even comparable in that way in terms of as investment vehicles. Right here in the United States, you're playing a longer game, I think. You're obviously tied to the league's health in a very significant way. And the league is operating in a marketing capacity that, say, League One and the Championship are not. The Football League, yes, I guess, on a whole in England. But again, those clubs are so tied into the identity of their communities that it's a fundamentally different thing than starting a new team from scratch the way you would in the United States. And even if you were buying an existing team in the United States, nobody in the USL is older than a couple of decades. And those teams, I don't know. We're talking about Richmond Kickers. Most clubs are, what's the average age of a USL team? 5 years? 8 years? Something, maybe? And again, pulled higher by clubs like Richmond and Charleston. They're different. They're very different things. Obviously, there's no promotion and relegation here.
Yeah,
in the United
States.
States.
The big one that's like kind of looming here.
You're not going to have a chance to move up the ladder, move up the pyramid. That, I think, for a lot of people who aren't actually in this investor class and just look at this from the outside and aren't participating, they're like, well, that's the deal breaker for me. If I can't go up to the top division, why on earth would I buy a lower division soccer club in America? But obviously people do start and buy lower division soccer clubs in America, so somebody is seeing value there. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist. Now, maybe they're stupid and the people buying clubs in England are smart. I don't know if it's as simple as that. I think, though, that if you asked me where I would prefer to put my money, I mean, I'm an American, and I want to believe in the growth of soccer in America, but I'm also very aware of how difficult it is to gain traction in American soccer. It's sort of like buying a minor league baseball team. Like, that there's a ceiling here, and your value it's not really your own. It's kind of tied to much bigger sort of issues of governance, issues of organization. That's not the case in League One or the National League. Very clearly, I start here, I can go up. I think I'd buy a club in the National League, Rob. I think I'd buy a club in England or Wales, I guess, whoever's available there now after Wrexham got scooped up, and try to make my way there. I mean, at least I would have the knowledge that if I do a little bit and have a little bit of success, I have a built-in fan base. Right? All I have to do is service that fan base, and they should show up for me. As opposed to the United States, where even if you're winning, you can't be guaranteed that fan base is going to show up.
Yeah, where is the room for gains, honestly, in the American game? So is it, you got from the time you bought it, it was kind of at the grassroots level. You found a way to get a stadium for your team, and then that's where you've jumped your evaluation. I mean, is that the route to that growth, to a buy low, sell high sort of outlook?
Well, man, yeah. So you mentioned Wrexham stadium situation and how much investment McElhenney and Reynolds had to put into that venue, and that's what the race horse ground. What's it called? The race course? I don't know what it's called. Something like that. Mm-hmm. Oldest stadium in Wales, whatever it is. It's got some history, right? They can't leave. Do you know what I mean? Like how much of a thing is it for any top level European club, but specifically in England, to leave their historic ground? And how hard is it sometimes? I mean, Everton is just now, after 20 years of talking about building a stadium, Everton is just now getting to that place. Liverpool is not talking about building a new stadium, and Anfield serves their purposes for the moment. What about Manchester United? How hard has it been for them to figure out, should we leave Old Trafford? Should we rehabilitate Old Trafford? What do we like? That's not a thing in American soccer. You may have venue issues, meaning you have to build your own place or play in a minor league baseball venue. But I guess you could always aspire to building your own place. And once you get to that level, then you're probably set. England, you're investing in probably an older ground, probably a couple of stands, in the middle of town. I guess that'd be okay. It's romantic for us, but I don't know. Those are interesting things to think about when you look at the business plan.
Well, put your thoughts in the comments there, viewers. What would you do if you were in the American investment class? Would you try to build something in your hometown, or try to find something to buy low, sell high in overseas?
Yeah, this is from Maria Stash. In USA, I'd start a team in my hometown, Wilkes-Barre and Scranton. You have to call the stadium the Office. You'd have to. Buy a USL championship spot. Call it Wyoming Valley Wanderers. That'd be great. That'd be great. I love that idea. And then if anybody has money, contact Urias Taj. There you go.
So Urias, in one episode, he committed to buy the oldest team in Spain and then create a USL side in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. Thanks for those comments. And then if you have a take, throw them in the comments below. We'd love to read those and respond, see what your thoughts are on buying in to Soccer Pyramid abroad or domestically. If you haven't already, hit subscribe on the Morning Kickaround YouTube channel. We are marching towards 1,000 subscribers. Follow us along on social media at MKickaround, X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, or send in a donation. Support the show, ko-fi.com/morningkickaround. We'll catch our breath, come right back with Monday's Big Question. Big question here on Monday, February 10th. About 2 weeks to go until Major League Soccer kicks off their 2025 season. There's been a flurry of transfers, some preseason drama. Teams can actually trade players for money, and there's an addition of a 30th team. So already some storylines cooking up. Jason, what are your top three intriguing topics moving into the 2025 MLS season?
With 30 teams now, it's almost impossible to narrow this down to three, Robert. I mean, before I go into my top three, I'm gonna give you a top three, and I'm gonna count them down, and maybe you can chime in with yours as well. But I'm just going to look through the entire list of clubs before we play the game. So it's going to be alphabetical, right, in terms of the standings. Atlanta United's in first place. Well, that's because they have an A. You could figure out pretty interesting storyline, I think, for every club. We'll come back to Atlanta. I'll save them. Charlotte. They just signed Wilfred Zaha. They got Patrick Aijamang, and we're going to see if he can explode in MLS this year. Chicago, Greg Berhalter, rebuilding. Lots of things happening there. FC Cincinnati, we've already talked about Lucho Acosta and the saga that is that. Columbus, I'm going to save them too. DC United, they're in flux. They've sold players and brought players in and traded players away. There's always something there. Inter Miami, need I say anything? They basically are a telenovela out of Miami these days. Montreal's always messy, always
random.
Dramatic,
very random,
always stuff going on.
If you were to label a team most random in MLS, would it be Montreal?
It might be Montreal, absolutely. Nashville, we're going to see if BJ with some new players and a new look can improve what they were. We've got the Revs. They sent out 14 players. And they brought in 14 players. They had 13. They brought in 14. They overhauled. If anybody overhauled, it is the New England Revolution.
There's been a few teams that have complete retooling.
New York City FC, rather. New head coach. They're not spending much, so they're not following a CFG kind of big spender model right now. The Red Bulls are the defending Eastern Conference champions. They sold John Tolkien. They brought in Eric Choupo-Moting for some reason. Nobody can figure out. Orlando is they've got moves, right? They feel like a sleeping Philadelphia. Need I say anything? Mike Thomas says, "LOL, we suck." At least you have a Super Bowl championship to hang your hat on these days. Yep. If you are from Philadelphia, Toronto's messy. Toronto's dramatic. There's always something going on there. I even got to the West. Austin spending big money. Colorado with trades. Cudi Pietro and making moves. FC Dallas has rebuilt and sent away two big names. The Houston Dynamo, no Ache. They just traded for Jack McGlynn. The LA Galaxy, defending champions, had to send away their starting center forward and have an injured player on their roster. They didn't DNI or whatever that word is, season-ending injury list for Ricky Puig. They're leaving him on the roster. He's taking up a spot, despite that, in fact, he can't play because they want him to be around the team, and he can't otherwise be around the team. Minnesota United, Portland's, Real, there's stories everywhere. But I think my top three, Atlanta United and the spending that they just did. They set a new transfer record for Latailath. They brought back Miguel Almiron for $10 million. They're pushing all of their chips into the middle. And while I think that's a club that could easily go back out and spend millions of dollars again in a couple years. This is MLS. You can't do this every single season. You can't do it every offseason. You're limited in what you can do. They're betting on a Middlesbrough player who scored goals in that division, but hasn't really ever been more than that. That's maybe a transfers. Maybe they see the profile. And again, a 30-year-old Miguel Almiron, who we haven't seen a lot from at Newcastle United. So I have to make that number one. They have the big spending Uncle Arthur. They've got the top executive in MLS, maybe in MLS history, in Garth Lagerwey. And they've got the guy he worked with in Seattle to build those teams and the guy who built Inter Miami and Chris Henderson. I'm sorry. They also have they have an MLS Cup winning head coach now in Ronnie Dyla. So Atlanta feels like they've done everything right. Can they put it together in a short turnaround with all those things happening and put together a championship winning team? I think that would be number one. Number two, the Columbus Crew. I mean, somebody comes in and offers you the money that they got for Cucho Hernandez, you say, sure, we'll sell Cucho Hernandez. What you can't say no in this league. And now we know that Christian Ramirez is an LA Galaxy player replacing Dejan Joveljic, I suppose is the way to think about that, at a much lower price tag because Joveljic had graduated from his U22 contract and was hitting the budget in a much bigger way. But Wilfred Nancy gives you confidence, right? Wilfred Nancy is a guy you will always believe is capable of putting a winning team on the field, sort of regardless of what his pieces are, based on his history in Columbus. And yeah, he's had Cucho Hernandez, and now he has to replace that. Can Diego Rossi take on more of the load? I guess is a big question. I mean, you tell me, Rob, do you have a lot of confidence? Does Columbus look like a team that's going to slide way down the table, or because of the Nancy factor and because of their institutional stability on some level, do you just go, hey, they should be fine?
Well, just keeping their coach, keeping Wilfred Nancy a win, because at the end of the season, they had been absolutely amazing last year, and the coaching was evident that they were so good, part and parcel of Nancy. So they kept him. So minor win there already for Columbus. Can they recreate what they did last year? I think that the machine can be created once again, whether or not the sharp end of that machine is functional. I feel like they may have the slip, especially at the first half of the season. I think it'll take some time. I think it might be a sluggish start to the season for Columbus. Maybe where they find somebody, or through the process of, working through their squad, someone stands out as that goal scorer. But it might be a tough opening month or so until they find their goal scorer in Columbus.
Yeah, that I think that's probably fair, right? And we maybe need to hold off judgment of Columbus, and that's probably true of every team, right? The beginning of the season is always very messy in Major League Soccer.
For a concise answer, I think eventually they will slide, but I don't think it'll be like a, top to bottom slide.
Okay. All right. At number 3 on my list is San Diego. I actually didn't count them down. I counted them up because I think Atlanta's the biggest story. But San Diego FC, obviously, look, again, there are stories everywhere. San Jose I didn't even get to them. Bruce Arena, how, is he still capable of putting a winning team on the field in Major League Soccer after what happened in New England? He got a bunch of players from New England into his squad. He brought some veterans in that he certainly knows. Joseph Martinez is there. Chicho Arango is there. We mentioned the potential move for Lucho Acosta. What would that mean for San Jose, who has not been relevant in Major League Soccer for quite some time? They still have a penny-pinching owner. But if anybody can figure a way to win with a penny-pinching owner, it's Bruce Arena. But I'm going to say San Diego because I'm always going to have my head turned by an MLS expansion franchise in their first season. Now, is San Diego going to be more St. Louis in their first year, more Austin in their first year, or are they going to be more Charlotte in their first year? Or are they going to be more, Minnesota United in their first year, which was a disaster, right? I think that there are some players that I like in this team. Obviously, the Luca De La Torre thing is fascinating, right? Not just because of what he might be able to do to help San Diego FC in a Major League Soccer, but because he is a national team player who has now chosen to leave Major League or leave Europe, rather, go to Major League Soccer, and people will demote him because of that. So can he play at a level that will keep him in the national team picture is a question. Obviously, Chucky Lozano, the Mexican star, who, has had a kind of a snake bit career. I mean, he's had some good moments, but he was supposed to be more than he ended up being, right? And that happens to a lot of Mexican players. So
they have a good run and then get kind of sidelined by expectations.
He bursts onto the scene. He gets the move to Europe to PSV back in 2017. He goes to Napoli, and he has a decent run at Napoli. He wasn't a bad player at Napoli, and they won a Scudetto, I think, while he was there, and they went to the quarterfinals of Champions. So he had some moments, but I think Mexican fans would say at 29, Tuca Lozano shouldn't be coming back to North America and playing in MLS in particular, right? Hey, if you're going to play in North America, play in Mexico. But this is obviously a choice he's made, and it's sort of, maybe you could argue it's similar to the Carlos Vela choice, right? I don't know if this is about personal reasons. Playing in San Diego keeps him very close to Mexico. He's not from Tijuana or anything. He's from farther away, but it's still culturally, I'm sure, very comfortable for him. And he gets to be the centerpiece of a club in a city that, we'll see, could be the next big success story in MLS when it comes to expansion.
Looking at, thank you for asking, but my three are maybe a little bit. You touched on them a little bit, but I feel like the top story, obviously, headlining Atlanta. It's been an uncomfortable few years for them. Their whole setup there, they got the big stadium, the big budget. They want to be the commanding force. They clearly haven't been for a couple of years. So, they've done all the right things to put themselves in that position. They've got the coach and they got the players. They seem to be a total attitude shift with that upswing at the end of the year last year. So will they return to the summit of MLS will be a storyline to follow up with. Can San Jose get good with good coaching in Bruce Arena? He's bringing in some interesting players. He's obviously good at the MLS thing. Can San Jose be a relevant team once again under Bruce Arena? I think is something keeping an eye on. And basically just going into this season, this will be the first year, from start to finish that I will be truly invested in doing this show with you. So it's been a few years since I covered an MLS season front to back all the way through. So I'm interested in finding more teams that I have an investment in, just that tickle my fancy. Like I covered Chicago Fire for a few years, and I lived there for a few years, so I know Fire a little bit. I know some players there, and fans, just stakeholders or people involved in the team. Columbus a little bit. One of my very best friends, Columbus, been down there a few times, but I want to talk to more people from more fan groups to know more teams around the league and get a little bit of more of a direct connection to more teams around the league. So the third one is, I'm going to be a little selfish, find myself a team that is interesting beyond the ones here just in my immediate Midwestern area. And
okay.
And one just kind of randomly off the cuff you touched off, I want to see if Charlotte will be good.
Okay.
I do want to see if they'll be good because they're a new team. Haven't really invested any time. I've seen a couple videos of they had some big celebrations and a couple nice moments. Will the addition, Zaha and the young American Ajamang, will they put Columbus, or not Columbus, Charlotte into the relevant echelon of Major League Soccer? And I'm curious to see that. Or will another team, really engage me as we venture into our first Major League Soccer campaign together here, Jason?
Yeah, that should be interesting. I mean, Charlotte, they blew the doors off in terms of attendance and the vibes and the atmosphere there in Charlotte. I think we have this kind of push-pull when it comes to soccer stadiums in this country or places where we play soccer. And that's, hey, we want our own buildings. We don't want to be playing in NFL venues. But then you see a city that responds to their team the way that, say, Atlanta has, or the way that Seattle did back in 2009, or the way that Charlotte has. And you're like, oh, okay, well, they should be playing there because they can get 70,000 people out to watch their team. I don't know that they're aiming for 70,000 every game, but it will be interesting to see if they can put a truly competitive team on the field. And I don't just mean making the playoffs. I mean actually being a contender, what that might mean for the explosion of interest in Charlotte and how that translates into, sort of the wider impact of soccer in that part of the country.
We shall see. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, contributing to the chat. Good episode here on a chilly Monday. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, Morning Kickaround on YouTube. Help us get closer to that 1,000 subscriber mark. Follow along on social media at mkickaround, X, Instagram, Blue Sky. Write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com. We have to dig into some of those, get to know your districts, and maybe a couple other guests that have written into our Gmail. Get a hold of them. Or if you want to, support the show directly, ko-fi.com/morningkickaround. Buy us a coffee or maybe even more. ko-fi.com/morningkickaround.
And a bagel. That's what you do.
Extra cream cheese. All right. Until Wednesday morning, everybody, please enjoy your soccer. Your morning has been kicked.